Hello everybody, this video is about internal conflicts and also resolving internal conflicts. Some of the implications, just gonna take my time with it in a beautiful scenic bit of nature here. So some of you have heard me mention this issue, internal conflicts related to things like autoimmune disease. I was shown a vision, you could say. I call it a vision. I don't know if that's the perfect term for it, but it doesn't matter. The same way I was guided through thousands of hours of research by things that would just show up in my consciousness, just be given to me like a gift. And about 95% of them, I was also given the gift of being taken down the right research rabbit hole and finding scientific papers and having the clarity to understand what they imply and put a lot of things together that I now use and benefit from. This is one of those things that just showed up that way. Um, You know, as some would say, as above, so below, and some would say that the micro and the macrocosm, the microcosm, the macrocosm, these things reflect each other, like the doctrine of signatures in nature, for example. There's a lot of things that if you're not overthinking in your left brain and you're training and your right brain is more active, and this is just one term for it, but suddenly you'll see something, you'll recognize something from the artistic side of your mind, and then if you're fortunate enough to be able to put together some evidence and some science to also confirm it with the left side of your mind, or the left side of your brain, let's say, it gets a lot easier to believe and apply these things. I don't know if there's any science out there yet to show evidence that internal conflicts relate to autoimmune disorders and diseases that are on the rise and have been for some time. Because honestly, I don't need to go and research the things to prove what I'm given like I used to. You know, after something, a phenomenon has occurred thousands and thousands of times in your life, and it has a perfect track record, it gets to a point where you don't have to go through the same process to help yourself believe what you've been given. And this is one of those situations for me. Perhaps somebody will come along on the threads and post some kind of science or information that shows this. I don't know. But I've definitely noticed a pattern. I do have very, very, very advanced pattern recognition. It's just one of my God given traits that I'm meant to use and apply well in life. So let's talk a little bit about some of the types of internal conflicts that exist, because there are many, many, many. I'm only going to be able to sit here and come up with some examples to give you some ideas, but because of the diversity of human consciousness and circumstances around the world, there are many, many, many different layers and versions and possibilities going on with people with these things. And I don't think there's anybody except Yeshua himself who's probably ever walked through this life and gotten to some kind of state where there's no more internal conflict whatsoever. There could be a few, but those numbers are so small it's irrelevant. So for the sake of conversation, let's just say everybody has these internal conflicts. Most people have a whole lot of them. Some of us have been able to resolve some of them and see the difference, and it's profound. So what are internal conflicts? It could be anything. You know, at a personal level, do you hold yourself to a different standard than you hold other people to? Do you love others more than yourself, or yourself more than others? Do you expect yourself to behave one way, but you expect other people to behave a different way? These are just sort of small personal versions of it. How about this? Were you born into a country that stands for certain things, and they tell you you're supposed to be a patriot and you're supposed to believe that your country is the best? And if you don't, you're a bad person and there's something wrong with you. And yet when you actually analyze the things that your country does, even with your own tax money, like building weapons and dropping bombs on innocent women and children in other countries to make a point, or for some power play or for some political game. See, I look at things for what they are, and I've lost a lot of sleep my whole life because of it. I am not okay with funding the murder of people that are essentially my brothers and sisters in other places. So, right there is a massive internal conflict. Now, some of you might be going, dude, why'd you have to say that? Because now I have a conflict with it too. I was okay a couple minutes ago. But the truth is, that's not really how this works. Just because my conscious mind is closer to my so called subconscious mind, making my subconscious not subconscious, at least parts of it, because they're more accessible and therefore conscious. What a lot of people don't realize is what they're calling the subconscious mind, which everybody has, calculates all these same things that mine does. So if you personally don't believe in dropping bombs on women and children somewhere else so that your country can get what it wants or control more of the globe or control some aspect of economy or all the other darker layers to the power plays that go on, if you're not a murderer at heart and you're not okay with that, and yet on the surface you're trained to go along with your country and support it and be a patriot, and so you're doing so, right there, because your subconscious has already calculated the truth and you're not maybe consciously aware of it, you're now living consciously one program and one egregore or whatever you might want to call it, and subconsciously you have a different truth that you're aware of. So now the subconscious having a lot to do with systems that are running in your body without you thinking about it, nervous system, circulation, immune system, is now in conflict with itself, and your subconscious doesn't have any agendas. It doesn't have a preference for life or death, good or bad. It doesn't really work that way. You have to make those decisions consciously. But your subconscious does recognize all the things that are not in alignment, where you believe one thing but you do another, or you believe two completely conflicting things, or maybe you believe several conflicting things. And this is very common. And being that it is tied to things like immune system and nervous system functions, there's disharmony reflected in those systems within your galaxy of cells here. That you're basically the indwelling spirit that these cells are all taking their cues from. You know, little electrons and orbits and nucleuses like suns and little planets revolving around them and stuff. Again, the micro is a lot like the macro, isn't it? So here in your galaxy, there's a bunch of conflicting programs running. What about your religion when it tells you things like God is love? Oh, that sounds great. An infinite, loving, awesome force that all things come from. And then it tells you God is to be feared. And if you don't worship, whatever that means, silly rituals, God's angry at you and God's holding grudges. Oh, and then also God built people wrong and God can't stand people. So then God tortured his own son to death to cover you with the blood of the innocent so that he can pretend you're righteous. Who is this he and why is he so psychotic? And why does he have nothing to do with the image of some kind of infinitely undescribable, all powerful, all intelligent force that isn't petty or threatened by the mistakes of man and has a bigger plan than anybody can see? Why are these things all in conflict with each other? And even if you choose to ride it out at the surface level and not think about it too hard, your subconscious calculates the complete nonsense of believing completely contradictory things. Believing a bunch of things that are inverted to each other and saying it's all the same thing and it's all good. Because again, you're going to be threatened that you're a bad person and you're in big trouble if you dare to question these things. So these are just examples. You can apply it to your own situation. Those are some big ones because around the world people are dealing with things like this. And maybe they're not consciously dealing with it. For those of you into astrology, what does it mean when your sun and moon are conjunct each other? It means that your conscious mind and your subconscious mind are very close to each other, right? So for all my bad aspects, that's a really good aspect. I have a couple really good ones. I suppose for me, it comes more natural to be able to look into my own subconscious while fully awake and lucid, at least when I'm not being distracted by a whole bunch of external stresses put on me. I can read things from my own subconscious, and I can bring things up and look at them honestly, shine some light into the dark. And then it's not dark, and you see a lot of the workings going on. And you see these massive conflicts people have been trained to walk around with and ignore. The problem is there's a huge drag on your energy. Your immune system is not working the way it could. Your circulation's not working the way it could. Your digestion and elimination are not working the way they could. Your lucidity and awareness are not working the way they could. Your connection to your actual spiritual nature is not working the way it could. Your ability to understand and process human emotions is not working the way it could. This has been a big one for me. I'm an emotional cripple, essentially. I'm very intelligent. I have a lot of spiritual access. But the weak leg of my table is that I don't know how to heal or work with human emotions very well. But it's not just me. This is rampant all over the planet. I'm just looking at it consciously and facing it. I'm able to see it. And with time and prayer and meditation, there will be more help. There are angels willing to help me with this, and all of us if we ask and really mean it. But see, these are just some interesting large scale examples. Um, I can think of a funny, well, it's not funny at all. I can think of a personal example. I had this Native American friend. We were best friends a long time ago. And he lived in a place where there was almost no other Native Americans. He was surrounded by white people, basically. We had a lot of talks about that. But anyway, in the little town where he lived, and I lived with him there for a while, there was this neo-Nazi biker guy who ironically was a friend of my friend. And this guy was a proud racist. He was totally proud of being a total racist. He had obscenities written on the back of his arm, so when the cops arrested him, he was giving them the finger verbally. He was quite a character. But the crazy thing was he loved hanging out with us. And I could tell that he loved my friend. I could tell that he appreciated him as a friend. And yet he had to constantly remind us of his racist rhetoric and his racist beliefs about being German or whatever it was. I can't remember because I didn't care. But it was hilarious because he loved hanging out with us and he loved my friend. It was obvious. It was obvious. So here you have this human being whose belief system and world identity are in complete conflict with his actual heart and personality and who he really is. He was not nearly as mean and vicious and evil of a racist as he wanted to think he was. I mean, he looked the part and he played the part, but underneath all that was a human being just enjoying another human being. You know, you had to be there. It was quite a phenomenon. And I'm sure that's not all that unusual. I've known people my whole life, and I've kind of been forced into it in the past myself, where your supposed belief system is actually totally in conflict with who you really are and how you really feel about people. And so you listen to the double talk. What people say is their belief and what they say is their way of life and their creed or their code or whatever it is, their idol belief system, basically. And then I've seen this go both ways. You have some people that claim to have this loving, wonderful belief system, but they're actually vicious, manipulative people and totally proud and unrepentant about it. We've all seen these hypocrites, right? Who can't admit fault and can't face that they need to work on themselves like most of us are willing to acknowledge, right? And then you've seen the opposite where people have these horrific belief systems, or at least I've seen this, and they're actually really nice people. So I just sit there and I kind of grin and shake my head like, what is this human need for an identity that you're willing to hold on to a totally ridiculous, stupid, negative identity when you don't need it? You're a better person than that, you know? It's the wildest thing. I've known atheists who actually, I can think of one example. This guy was like, he's one of the best people. And I literally heard a voice and felt a warm feeling. And I saw him in a golden glow. And this voice said to me, "You will never meet a better person." And it was so true. I will never meet a better person. And he actually walked in a more Christ-like way, literally, than any professing Christianity worshiper I've ever seen, by miles. Now, this man doesn't try to define believing in some deity, and he doesn't need lingo or thoughts like that. And probably because of the abuse and the hypocrisy of religion, he wouldn't go anywhere near it because he's too kind hearted to even consider things like that. But, ironically, or maybe not so much so, without reading a thing about it, without being told anything about it, he's walking a righteous life. He's one of the most kind, patient, service to others, turn the other cheek, humble, intelligent, gentle, quiet, meaningful human beings I've ever had the honor to meet. I hope I get to interact with him again, actually. But, it's things like that. What people say they believe, what they say their creed is, versus who they are. Entirely different things. So when you think about it, without going to a dark place and talking about straight up evil that masquerades as good, we are talking about different forms of hypocrisy here with a lot of this, where you say you believe one thing and you say you're this, but you're not really. You're really something else. You might be a lot better than what you say you are. You might be a lot better person than what your worldly creed indicates about you. So it's really strange to me that, and this is just one category of internal conflict. Because if a person was more conscious of that, they would do something about it. They would drop their unnecessary identity. It's really just some negative thing they don't need. And other types might drop their fake positive identity and just, you know, go full control freak or full psychopathic or whatever it is they're trying to do. I don't know. But these things play out everywhere. I see a lot of young guys. I've counseled a lot of young guys and heard from a lot of young guys on various social media channels talking about how women are so vicious and women are so bad and women can't be trusted and there's no good women anymore. And then later they all acknowledge they have a serious porn masturbation problem. And I also look at the kind of stuff that they believe, this very divisive stuff that I don't spend any time watching, but I pick up on the patterns of the kinds of things guys are watching on social media. And I realize, you know, you need to resolve your own internal conflicts. You need to acknowledge that you very much do want a meaningful relationship with a woman. And you're holding a lot of conflicting negative beliefs, both about yourself and about females. And you're saying one thing and you're feeling another thing. And you're trying to say that they're dangerous and they're sketchy and they're this and they're that. But at the same time, you're telling me these belief systems you have, which make you totally incapable of having a positive, functional relationship with a female currently. So then we start to get into like the mirroring effect where you can look around the world and see any little divided group of humanity because everybody's been divided by everything now, divisively, because they don't question the so-called authorities that control their thinking. But you always have people saying, well, it's their fault, it's the woman's fault. And when I look at it from females' perspectives, I'm like, you know, good luck finding a guy who is actually going to be an asset to your life. I mean, it looks pretty dire from either perspective, guys. And as long as somebody's blaming somebody else and not acknowledging that the truth is you don't really trust yourself, and you got these habits that just reinforce your lack of trust for yourself. So then you're projecting it and you're saying women can't be trusted. But what you're really saying is I can't be trusted. So I can't trust a woman. So there's a mirroring factor or a projecting thing going on, but it still comes back to being another internal conflict. What about people who say, oh, here's my dream life. I'm going to do this one day. But they don't. 99% of people that talk about that, they're never going to do it. Why? Because they don't believe they can. In a lot of cases, that would be what it is. But in other cases, it's because they don't really ever intend to do it anyway. They just like having a fantasy to dream about once in a while, but it's not really real to them. And people say things like, well, I'm going to get financial freedom. But then the neighbor buys a new vehicle and then they buy a new vehicle. and go another 50,000 into debt that just ensures you're going to be a slave for another 30, 40 years. And that car will be trash long before you get it paid off. It's just going deeper and deeper into a hole, you know. So these are just some, I don't know, pretty common examples, I think. And there's a lot of different variation to personal internal conflicts a person could have. For example, there's difficult situations you get in life where you're trying to keep everybody happy, you're trying to stay out of conflict, you're trying to live a life of peace with everybody. But because of the dynamics of certain individuals in your life, they're making it impossible. They're making it impossible for you to live in peace with them because they're undermining the well-being of your family, for example, or your marriage. You know, I've had friends in the past, good friends, that were great friends to me, but they could not help but try to meddle or get in between me and my wife, probably because they wanted all my time to themselves, or at least more of it, or they felt threatened by that relationship. And when they pushed it, because subconsciously they had this conflict, so they pushed the issue without knowing what they were doing. They were pushing to see whether I would choose them or my own wife. So, you know, I'll always love these friends and care about them in my heart, but they basically pushed me to where I had to show them the truth about that. You know, I don't need buddies. I'm perfectly fine operating on my own with my own family. I enjoy a good friend, but I don't need one. And, you know, my wife, like, I'm going to honor that relationship always. What God has put together, let no man try to bring apart. If you make that mistake with me, I mean, you've basically just X'd yourself out of the equation. So if they would have been able to think consciously about this weird insecurity and how they're meddling in my relationship, they might have been resolved. They might have been able to resolve it by looking at it consciously. A lot of things about people scare themselves. So when they get a hint or a taste of it, they either don't even realize they're sensing something about themselves, so they just project it onto somebody else. See what's so horrible about those people over there? And really, wisdom would have you look at what it is about yourself that you find terrifying that way. So you can shine some light into the dark and not let things go on in the dark without any light, because that's where they really cause trouble. When you shine a light on what's in your own darkness, your own shadow, let's say, it doesn't have to be your shadow anymore. It can be integrated, and any aspect of you can potentially be used for positive outcomes, for positive purposes. But if you're afraid of it and you're judging it, you're just gonna project and judge it in others. You're gonna blame other people. You're not gonna make any improvements to yourself. And that very aspect that you judge in others is going to bite you. It's going to. Because what you judge in others, you're basically just judging yourself. You're setting yourself up for something. So when you catch yourself being triggered by something about other people a lot, wisdom would be not to like what they're doing per se, but to figure out what it is about yourself that's the same, that you're actually judging. When you're born in a world and you're forced to, you know, go along with this and get educated that way and have a job and a career, and before you know it, you're in debt and you have all these obligations and responsibilities you can't see your way out of for the next 100 years, most people just give up and distract themselves with material reality, eating gluttonous, terrible food combinations that make you sicker and duller, numbing yourself out that way. Alcohol was a big one for me. Various other substances. A lot of people just buy more stuff they can't afford. It's like the frustration of being in financial slavery makes people just dive further into financial slavery. It's a vicious cycle. And I understand that it's overwhelming to look at your situation and go, man, I don't even see any way to even be financially free within the next several decades without doing something awful that, again, would cause me internal conflict. I had to deal with this. I got into certain situations where I could have made a lot of money real fast, but I didn't agree with what I was doing. So I had to walk away from it, even though my goal was to get my family out of society and into a holistic life that we can work with God's creation and experience life more and more abundantly as we go. I couldn't take certain shortcuts that were presented to me that I had the opportunity to take. I couldn't do it. The internal conflict would have been too great. I probably would have manifested a disease and never made it out of society anyway. I've done a lot of things where I fought myself really hard until I defeated myself and beat myself up and choked myself out several different times for years on end. And I had to start understanding what this means. There are certain internal conflicts that are so strong when you try to violate them, you basically destroy yourself in the process. The type that most people are dealing with are they manifest disease and trouble more slowly. It's more of a slow, chronic moving situation, which is in some ways more dangerous. Society is full of chronic ways to kill yourself that are totally okay. I'm not picking on smokers, but look at cigarettes. They have 4,000 industrial byproduct chemicals added to them, causes every kind of gene damage you can imagine. People know this. They're not smoking to make their life longer, and I'm not judging anybody for it. I've done a lot of self abusive things. I'm just talking about this topic. So, in a society, it's totally okay to smoke, drink, and eat yourself to death because those are big markets and a lot of money and control is in those. But what if you just decide to stop burdening people and you just hang yourself, right? I'm not condoning that because you're not supposed to check out of an incarnation you've taken on. It's not going to do you any real good. But there are people that are overwhelmed and hurting so bad they just end it rather than dragging on their own damage and whatever damage they're doing to others. But that's totally taboo, right? So it's interesting. Acute ways of dying are not okay, but slower ways that make somebody a lot of money and keep things the way they are, those are totally okay. And actually, in recent times, I've seen ways of people dying quickly that were deemed okay and used on a mass scale, but I can't talk about it. I talked about it ahead of time and tried to warn people, but even that got me in trouble. So no names, stats, or facts will be mentioned there, but it's just something to consider. What if you're someone who believes in holistic healing, but you're not really practicing it fully yet? Because I've been there. And you go to a doctor and you take antibiotics because you're infected with something that's really kicking your butt, and you know full well this is going to wipe out my gut flora. It's going to give me leaky gut. It's going to make my whole body sicker. It's going to take away what little immune system I did have that wasn't enough. And I'm starting over from a deficit even worse than where I was before I got this illness. What if you know all that and you do it anyway? I submit to you that it will actually hurt you worse than a person who's completely ignorant about what they're doing. That's a spiritual principle, basically, that to do wrong is to do wrong, but those who know what they're doing is wrong, they are accountable at a higher degree than those who don't. Ignorance doesn't make you innocent of doing wrong, but those who willfully do wrong are actually in a lot more trouble, you could say. So you're responsible for what you're aware of. Don't be the dog that returns to its own vomit. Um, so there's a price to be paid, and it's a good price, by becoming more aware of what your internal conflicts are. It's not going to be convenient because you're going to start to recognize a lot of things about your life, maybe the whole thing currently. I mean, it kind of got that way for me, where it's essentially just the whole thing. There's just nothing in the world I'm trapped in and all the options I've had and tried so far that's in alignment with who I really am. Uh-oh. The good news is if you're willing to persevere through that and do what it takes with faith and vision and purpose and using whatever gifts God's given you to navigate to get from here to there, you can come out of that shining as a whole new person with a lot more fortitude for life and a lot more wisdom and a lot more strength in a variety of ways. And the ungood news is if you bring out what's inside of you, it'll save you. And if you don't bring out what's inside of you, what you don't bring out will kill you. Gospel of Thomas. It's another spiritual principle. But yeah, there's definitely a connection to autoimmune disease. In a society where the different groups, the different subcategories, everybody's now been divided into so that the so-called elites can keep control of all of you and have you do their work for them and destroy each other when they trigger you into it and go kill the so-called bad guys and then uh, undermine yourselves every which way possible so a lot of money can be made off all the disease and struggle. In a divided scenario like that, where the different parts of the same body are working against each other, what does that mean? What is an autoimmune disease? It's where within this matrix, this galaxy of cells, there are now things that are supposed to be one that are hurting each other. To put it in totally simple terms, that is the microcosm showing you the same thing that you're participating in the macrocosm. Any division, us versus them, I'm better than you, it's your fault, not mine. Anything you do like that externally, you're also doing it internally. It's spiritual law. And until people want to face the reality of oneness and step up to it and understand that whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me, and that's literal, people will keep destroying their biology just like they're going to keep destroying the world around them on the outside. The inner and the outer are made from the same thing, and they operate on the same principles. They're not even disconnected. They're just kind of the different sides of the mirror of the same thing. Wisdom in a more spiritual path has you coming from the inside and then going outward, whereas the worldly man and the people that don't see with the eyes of spirit, they only really see the outside and they have no idea what's going on the inside of themselves. A lot of internal conflict. If you look around in the world and you see external conflict, understand that any of those that you're involved with in any way, shape, or form, whether you want to be or not, are also inducing and reflecting matching internal conflict. That's the simple truth of this method. Method, message. So my method is work on it at what speed you can. Be honest, be real. Reflect on the outer and the inner. And the more you learn to reflect on the inner, the more you're going to understand the outer. And the more you come out of the inner matrix and correct your internal conflicts so you stop draining yourself or giving away your energy to causes and vampiric entities you don't even want to be giving it to, the more of that power comes back to you. It's like a spiritual game. And then you can be more of a radiant being of service to creation. You're working with the creator instead of working against creation. And you're now able to be of service to creation. More so, with much more power and fortitude and vitality and freedom and creativity and vision and wisdom. And most importantly, love. Over and out for now, my friends.